My aunt thought she could rob me blind, so I exposed her. When I lost my parents in a car accident, everything familiar was ripped away overnight. The only familiar comfort left was my school, a private academy I had spent almost a decade at, where my friends had become family. But even that was threatened when I had no choice but to move in with my Aunt Linda and her daughter Sophie. From the very first day, it was clear Aunt Linda wasn't thrilled to have me. She sighed dramatically as she rearranged the guest room, making pointed comments about the financial burden I'd brought into her life, despite the sizable inheritance my parents had left me. At first, I dismissed her words as just stress talking. After all, she lost a sister. But soon, her true intentions emerged. One evening after dinner, she casually announced that it was too expensive to keep me in my private school. She suggested enrolling me in the local public school so we could use the money elsewhere. I stared at her and asked, "What do you mean elsewhere?" She avoided eye contact and smiled uncomfortably. She said, "Well, Sophie deserves nice things too, don't you think?" She explained that Sophie wanted to go to Paris this summer with her friends, and that my tuition money could really help with that. I felt a lump form in my throat, unable to believe what I was hearing. Meanwhile, Sophie smirked at me from across the table, clearly loving every second of it. My school was the last piece of my old life, my last link to my parents, especially since my aunt refused to let me bring anything into her home that reminded her of my mom. Losing my school would leave me truly alone. I tried to reason with Aunt Linda, desperately pleading that I needed my friends, my teachers, but she was unmoved, and told me about yet another lavish trip she had planned, this one for herself. She discussed buying expensive clothes and extravagant gifts for Sophie using my inheritance. I felt powerless, frustrated, and heartbroken. My aunt was determined to erase everything my parents had worked so hard to give me, treating me as if I were an inconvenience rather than family. I couldn't let her take away my future. Desperate and scared, I started researching, spending late nights digging through legal forums and reading every page of paperwork my parents had left behind. That's when I discovered something important. My parents had named a family friend, my former teacher Ms. Collins, as the trustee of my inheritance. Aunt Linda had been lying the entire time, illegally spending money that wasn't hers to touch. Gathering all the evidence, I called Ms. Collins, tearfully explaining everything. She immediately stepped in, fiercely advocating for me. A week later, Aunt Linda received a formal letter from Ms. Collins' lawyer, demanding reimbursement for every penny she'd unlawfully spent. Terrified of getting sued, Aunt Linda quickly returned most of what she'd taken, embarrassed and furious. Seeing Aunt Linda humiliated was satisfying, even if it brought on a new wave of harassment from both her and my cousin. Ms. Collins promised to stay in touch to make sure nothing like that would happen again, and that I'd be treated with respect. Then she told me something important. My parents might be gone, but their love, their determination to protect me, was stronger than anything my aunt could ever do.